Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Williams and I'm a senior communication major at Columbus State University. Today I'm going to be explaining to you guys about the standpoint theory. That's the theory that I chose to do research and to do my research paper on. So stay tuned if you want to learn all about it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of walk you through my research paper. So first, I had an abstract, and it basically explains a little synopsis of my paper, just kind of gives you a little overview in like 3 or 4 sentences. So in my abstract, I explained that the standpoint theory was established by George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel 2 centuries ago. And I asked a few questions to entice the reader. Like, have you ever wondered why different cultures have drastically different views on society, politics, and lifestyles? Have you ever wondered why men and women view the world so differently? Standpoint theory explains how the social groups we are in shape what we experience and our perspective on anything in life. This theory focused predominantly on males versus females. Okay, so now that you know about the abstracts of my paper, let's go a little deeper. So the main people that wrote the section in the book, Standpoint Theory, is Sandra Harding and Julia Wood. They claim that the social groups within which we are located powerfully shape what we experience and know, as well as how we understand and communicate with ourselves and others around the world. So our standpoint affects our worldview. By definition, a standpoint is a viewpoint or an attitude towards a particular issue from one's own perspective. So we're going to go a little deeper about history of standpoint. As I mentioned before, the standpoint theory began when George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a German philosopher, studied the different standpoints between slaves and their masters in 1807. So that was more than 2 centuries ago. Hegel analyzed the master-slave relationship to show that what people know about themselves and those around them is based on which group they are located in. So basically, he studied slaves and what they thought of the world versus their masters and what they thought of the world. And he concluded that it varied on the standpoint in which social group they were in. Both have different views on laws, freedom, punishment, childbirth, different things in society, and both are based on the social groups they're located in. Later, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels elaborated the theory by establishing the proletarian theory. So that kind of came after the standpoint theory. It was kind of it was still related, but different, and they got all of their ideas from Hegel's standpoint theory. So a standpoint is a place from which you view the world. Some synonyms for standpoint is viewpoint, perspective, and position. The connection in these words include a specific time and a place in which an observation occurs, while referring to attitudes. The most influential factor that regulates a perception is through experience. So, the tradition and culture also shapes a person's perception to a certain degree. The geographical locations, the socioeconomic position, the kind of job, and also basic gender differences affect a person's standpoint. So, I'm going to go into a little more detail about each of those in just a second. So first, I mentioned experiences play a large role in the standpoint of different people's views. So experiences can be anything that you've actually done in your life, anything you've experienced. So going across the world as a cultural experience, that can greatly affect and shape a person's standpoint. Next is traditions. So everyone's family, most of the time, have traditions. Those are just something that are kind of inherited, natural. You don't really question, you just do it. So traditions can affect standpoint. Socioeconomics can affect standpoint. Depending on socioeconomics, one's behavior and view towards a subject can differ. And according to the text, and Harding is one of the authors of the text, Harding said that the perspective from the lives of the less powerful can provide a more objective view than the perspective from the lives of the more powerful. So 2 more groups basically influence the standpoint theory, and that is the geographical location, so where you reside, where you are, where you've been, the weather, temperature, the weather, scenery, plants, where you're located, and also gender differences play a huge role in the standpoint theory. Women are considered to be a marginalized group, so you'll see when I really get into talking about my research paper, a lot of standpoint theory is referred to as feminism standpoint theory. So basically it's comparing men versus women standpoints and how they get to these perceptions and perspectives based on gender. So the standpoint theory is a postmodern method for analyzing intersubjective discourses. Popular feminist standpoint theorists such as Dorothy Smith and Patricia Hill Collins, they are sociologists, Nancy Hartsock and Allison Jagger, they're political philosophers, and Hilary Rose, which is a sociologist of science, and the philosopher Sandra Harding, which is one of the authors that are in our books, completely changed the idea of the standpoint theory a few decades ago. Okay, so now I'm going to read to you an example of how standpoint theory is implemented in someone's everyday life. This is an example written by Terry Elliott. So, the influence of social location in standpoint theory shapes not only the way in which we understand the world, but also the way in which it is presented to us through experience and failure. Consider the following example offered by Terry Elliott. Person A approaches a building and enters it unproblematically. As she approaches, she sees something perfectly familiar, which, if she might ask, she might call it the entrance. Person X approaches the same building and sees a great stack of stairs and the glaring lack of ramp for a wheelchair. The experience of person A is of the entrance to a building, whereas the experience of person X is of a barrier to entrance, at best, an inconvenience. Person X's social location, person with a disability, means that the building presents differently to her from how it does to someone without a disability. Feminist standpoint theories seek, moreover, to go beyond analysis and description of the role played by social location in structuring and shaping knowledge. So person A is familiar with the building in which they were approaching, and so it just, with no problem, went inside the front entrance because it's familiar. It's familiar with the location. The second, person X in the example, had a very hard time and could not find the entrance, and that was based on a disability. So its location and its health really shaped the perspective and the experience it got out of entering this building. Okay, so in conclusion, standpoint theory can and will play a role in marginal groups for many years forward. It's had a very intricate history, and I believe it will still play major roles in people's lives in the future. I respect Heigl for coming up with such an intricate theory, and many have been influenced and have influenced modern theories by reading Heigl's theory. Although most associate this theory with the feminist perspective, standpoint theory can also represent the poor, the illiterate, and any other socially marginalized groups. And so I'm very thankful I got to research this theory and understand it better, and I have a deeper meaning and definitions of the standpoint theory, and I look forward to learning more. I hope you guys learned what it means to use and implicate the standpoint theory in your everyday life.